How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the secret history living inside of your aquarium. Today we're going to talk about this aquascape, growing pains. We're also going to talk about ancestris and hardy fish. So these could be broken up into several videos, but I'm going to kind of combine them right now. So you may notice that this scape, up until recently, I was brushing with a toothbrush and doing 40% water changes daily, 30 to 50% water changes daily, vacuuming up dead. These are all tissue culture plants, so things that didn't take, debris that has settled out of the water, and then also just algae. We've got a little bit of, let's see here if we can get it focused for you. We've got a little bit of hair algae back in there, and then we have this just generic cyanobacteria algae mix, and we probably have a little bit of diatom algae in there too. So far it's hugging to the rocks very strongly. So what I wanted to mention is that these rocks last night, they were all covered like this, and that algae will grow in this tank in a matter of about 48 hours. It will go from scrubbed bare to that at the settings I have. And so let's talk about that really quick. This is a high-tech tank. So in this tank, we have CO2 running at about a bubble and a half per second. It's a 20-gallon tank. We've got a full spectrum white to blue light LED. And then we also have a Fluval Aqua Sky red. I have it set to red, and then full spectrum white LED on there also. So we're pumping this thing full of light. We're pumping it full of carbon, and plants use carbon to build and to grow. And then we also have ADA Amazonia soil, and this is the light version of the soil. So in theory, it has less ammonia and fertilizers, active fertilizers for your plants, but nevertheless, it was still, when I put it into the tank originally, we were getting 5 to 8 parts per million of ammonia in the water. Nothing was probably going to live in that water very well. So within a week or two, I started filling this thing with plants. The stem plants are growing very well. We've got Ludwigia, we've got Pogostemon erectus. Also, you can see the algae growing on the Pogostemon. I am going to need a secret helper for this, and you can see that endlers and guppies, they get hungry in between things and they decide, I'm gonna have a salad. So if you feed them lightly, they will eat the algae, and it is not harmful to them or anything. But my secret helper, who is of course hiding down in the rocks now, I put him in last night, and he is an ancestris. He's a calico ancestris, commonly known as a bristlenose pleco, and actually it's a she, no barbels on her, and she's only about yay big, something like that, but she's gonna hang out in the tank for a couple weeks while this process is completing. And so some people don't put anything in the tank and they scrub everything by hand, but that is a really futile battle. And you could also black out the tank. You could also, so let's talk about that really quick. You can get rid of ammonia and nutrients that cause the growth of algae. The problem is they also cause plants to flourish. And this is your golden window in a high-tech tank. This is a tank provided by Aquarium Zen in Seattle. Thanks to Steve, the owner there. Awesome dude, awesome shop. But most high-tech tanks, especially with a lot of stonework, like I'm pushing the envelope with the amount of stone here, and I did it a wet start method, not a dry start method, so that's the background. But when you do this, your scape is full of the chemicals leaching from your substrate. And right now, even with all those water changes that I'm doing, I'm running at 0.25 to 0.5 ammonia a day, or I was until 2 or 3 days ago. Now I've had a few days solid of under 0.25 parts per million or under. But That being said, it's because all these plants are sucking all of that up. Now, all these plants, almost all of them, were tissue cultures. And so they've all grown, this is week 4, they've all grown from yay high to the place you see them at right now because of this. And so one way to get rid of algae, eliminate its fuel, its food, which is nitrogen, nitrates, potassium, carbon, all the things plants need, light also. And I don't want to do that. I want to use that to carpet and to grow my tank, to use it to the fullest of its ability. And maybe you shouldn't have fish in there generally. But I'm also going to talk briefly about some fish you can bend the rules with, and I have done so for decades, and it's usually, almost always, turns out just fine. So you can do that. You can black out the tank so no light gets in for 5 days, and that will kill algae. That will not necessarily kill all cyanobacteria, as only a component of it is photosynthetic. There is another microscopic level of it, and also biofilms and things like that. They have zooplankton and very micro copepods, all sorts of different little critters that they incorporate into their both phytoplankton and zooplankton, and so they can live in darkness a lot longer than you would think. And most of the times when you see algae, it's not just algae you're seeing. It's a combination of fungus, algae, protists, which are tiny little critters, and then all the planktons and micro flora and fauna. So covering it up doesn't really do it too much good now, does it? Because it can still grow. Plus the fungus has no problem growing in the dark. And then your plants are also not going to do well. They may even die. And you want to keep them on a regular schedule. So my plan is to jack everything up to the max and to keep loading this tank with plants. So I have plants that at night, I've just been floating pots of plants in here. You know, like this is a piece of hornwort that, or hornweed, whatever you want to call it, that was probably this large 2 or 3 days ago, and now it's this size. So I'm using this as a nursery tank for now, and I think that's a great way to use your new Aquascape if you have a spot like up front here where I'm not everything's set like in the wall of the back or in the corners or the cracks of the rocks. It's a great place to put plants like crypts and things like that, and really grow them at a fast pace, and then you can put them in other tanks afterwards, and they don't embed into this substrate like many do. So even though the substrate's much more expensive and everything, there's some major pros to it. The con to it is that you can't really push these delicate, sometimes pellias and things like that, down, and so you need to glue them to a rock or tie them to wood or stone or something like that to get your full bang for your buck out of it. Now, that being said, I also have been adding things like iron. I've been adding things like potassium and other chemicals, macro and micro nutrients for plants. You can buy stuff like Easy Green or Flourish from Seachem, and then they've got Flourish Iron and Flourish all sorts of, they have a whole line of stuff. But for me, I'm using iron, potassium, manganese, magnesium, teeny bits of those, and zinc, and then also using a teeny bit of and it's minute amounts. In the food that I feed the fish, there's things like copper, and copper's deadly to shrimp, can be very deadly to fish too, but it's in trace amounts. A lot of the things that are harmful are actually not harmful to these animals, and they need them. Just like we have lead in our body in very small amounts. So that's something to understand too, is that when you need to be careful with sensitive shrimp and things, but you can get away with, especially guppies and live bears, you can get away with these trace amounts of things that help plants. And you can put things like guppies, endlers, mollies, swordtails, platies. A lot of the live bears are fine. The other fish that are really hardy are ones that breathe out of water, also known as labyrinth fish oftentimes. And so that can include bettas, that can include wild labyrinth fish, licorice gouramis, certain gouramis. I'm not saying that fish should live in ammonia, but if you are dialing in a tank and you do need fish in there, or you don't need them in there, but you would like a couple fish in there and have the tank cycling that way, you can get away with it. But you want to watch the fish, make sure that their gills aren't red, make sure that their activity is normal. And these guys are happy as little clams. And I have 1 guppy and 5 endlers hanging out in here. There's one from Lucas Brett's there, rainbow leopard endler. And then we've got some Japanese blue grass and Japanese blue endler mixed. So that's what's going on. Now you may wonder, wow, that rock looks pretty clean. So that's the next line of critters you can put in here. And I waited 4 weeks to do this because I put an autosynclus in there and he was not happy. I could tell that he was getting ammonia burn on his gills. They looked a little red even within a day. And he was just very sluggish, and then he would go towards the top. If you see your fish going towards the top or gulping, that's another sign, even if it's not a high-tech tank, that your tank isn't cycled, that there's something going on with either the fish's gills, flukes, or that there's ammonia burning their gills. They're not getting enough oxygen, those kind of things. And so you want to watch carefully. But I have an ancestris in here now, and this ancestris alone has cleaned since last night. All the rocks look like this. And I didn't know it would be such a incredible change so quickly. He cleaned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can see where he traveled, or she traveled. You can see here, she got there and around the edge under there, and then came across here. Did a light cross there. There's so much in here growing so fast that I probably will get a couple more and throw them in there. But that is then taking the nutrients, putting it straight into the fish, and then the plants are still getting it too. Now, they're not the best at getting fine things off, algae off of leaves, and especially delicate feathered needled plants. And so with those, that's where guppies, shrimp, things like that come in. But shrimp are going to be your last addition. So you can add snails fairly early on. A lot of them are tolerant to small levels of ammonia. And keep in mind that any level of ammonia can make your fish sick easier. It weakens their immune system and it stresses them for the most part. Labyrinth fish, mud skippers, things like that, they still absorb the ammonia, but they do have the ability with the organ, like licorice gouramis and things, they have an organ that allows them to breathe oxygen from the top of the water, as do some catfish. They can gulp and things like that. Now, cories are sensitive, and there's one more thing working in your favor here, and that is that if you're using, EcoComplete or Fluval Stratum, well, you won't have the ammonia problems with some of those. But with anything with the real soil with ferts in it and ammonia, nitrogen, nitrates, magnesium, potassium, all that stuff, you're going to have this cycle at first that causes an ammonia and algae spike. It's just kind of inevitable. And you can clean it and remove it by hand. You can try to do that. It's a very uphill battle when you have a lot of hardscape. Or you can put something in like these fish. And so right now the ancestris or pleco, great. Yep, there he is. So he is, or she is, being shy, but moving quickly, eating lots, all good signs, and I'll monitor her, and I may even rotate her out just to be extra super duper safe. but they are able to zoom to the top and gulp also. But they're not going to get the delicate stuff, like I said. So that's when you kind of have to be careful, use your toothbrush, get things out, try not to ruin your plants if you can help it. But you can always cut, especially if it's blackbeard or some of the tougher algae, just cut off that part and it'll grow back because you've got good fertilizers in here. Now I've also put some red ramshorn snails in here, and they will be working on that too, but they do something that frustrates me in that they eat some of my delicate plants. And yes, they eat mostly dead things. Snails mostly are detrivores or eating detritus, but they also will eat fresh, tender spots, or if there's one like spot that's bad, they'll sometimes munch more than just that spot. So they're in there. The snails are in there. What I really want in here is the ammonia to be not detectable in a test, and that's when my A string comes in for the plants, and that will be a mono shrimp. And so a mono shrimp or babalti shrimp or Malawa shrimp, those are all great shrimp to clean. Neocaradinas will do it too. Caradinas will also do it, but they pick up things off the ground that others have not eaten. Plant matter, biofilms, things like that. Food, poop, they sort through that kind of stuff. Whereas some of these other critters will actually go straight for the algae growing on the plants. And so you want to make sure that you don't put too many in, too many of the animals that eat these things either, because sometimes then they will turn onto your plants. But it's usually not a huge issue. And if you're keeping an eye on your aquarium, as I'm sure you are if you have a high-tech aquarium, planted tank, then it should not be an issue. So I know the water's kind of bubbly and that's distracting, but I just wanted to kind of tell you guys what was going on here, how happy I am that the ammonia has dropped low enough that I can get the plecos in. I'll probably be putting another one in and then take the other one out, give it a rester just in case there's too much ammonia. And then I'm not going to bother putting other fish in here other than just these guys, which are in here for looks, but also as canaries and coal mines, because I know from experience that guppies and endlers, they can tolerate some ammonia unless they're very fancy strains, inbred strains. The wilder strains, the older strains, can actually tolerate quite a bit of ammonia oftentimes, and so you'll start to see signs, or you'll see ick develop or something like that. And you can usually save them from that if you're experienced in looking for those signs. But I wanted to give you guys this update, show you how this tank was going. This is the Aquarium Zen tank, the Broken Arch Bridge, or the Sistine Chapel. You can check that out in old videos, or not too old, but videos from a couple weeks ago where I started this process. And also, if you like this stone that's in here, this bluish gray stone, it is Cascade Banded Jadeite, and I want that to show. So that's why I'm going to have a very devoted cleanup crew in this tank. I have a mono shrimp arriving soon. I will put them in probably day 2 or 3 that the ammonia is detected in the test close to indiscernible from the color chart, where it looks like there's almost no green, and it's been at close to that level anyways the last few days with the water changes and things, but you got to stay on top of that. So there's some behind the scenes tips on how to keep your newly planted high-tech tank looking nice. Also, it is work, and you need to do those water changes at first and later on too. I mean, it's important. But the good bacteria is building up. I've used filtered media in the back of my filter. I've also put crushed eggshells in there, which helps with calcium. And so I'm getting it ready to house a colony of shrimp. So I hope this information helps you guys with your new tanks. I hope you're digging this scape in the tank and some of the oddball and rare plants that I'm trying to grow in this scape, including the Nymphea micrantha, that's the purple Egyptian lotus or lily, and here's another version of it, and you can see here how purple it can be. And then also lacustris, Ludwigia x lacustris, it's a natural hybrid, and a few other funky plants that are in here, hard to find, some mosses too. So, with all that being said, it was a little wordy, and I apologize, but I wanted to cover the bases of several topics, and I'll do another video of the best fish that can handle ammonia. I know a lot of people say you shouldn't put any fish in your tank cycling, you shouldn't use any ammonia, but I know for a fact that it will be okay with the hardier guppy species. This big guy right here, he's been in there since day one of when it was fully planted. So that's about a week into it, doing 50% water changes. I wasn't even worried about starting the biological nitrogen cycle, beneficial bacteria. I didn't worry about that until week 2 or 3 when I added the medium. But it also introduces algae when you use that to jumpstart a tank. So if you're jumpstarting from another tank, make sure to use it from a tank that's nice and healthy and not covered in like blackbeard algae or something along those lines. And that's why I like the cultured plants, which you can get from ADA Amano, you can get them from H2O plants, you can get them a lot of places online now, and they're great. No snails, no pests or parasites. So that is the scoop. You heard it here. You'll be able to see this unfold as time goes on. It's one of my 9 scapes and tanks set up right now. If you want to get in on rewards like art and fish from my harems of fish and from what I keep, as well as plants and artwork, original artwork, be sure to subscribe, and you can check out my Patreon for ways to get that. And then also, I'm prone to giving away fish and plants, especially to those who want to pay shipping and so forth, but also just to Patreon supporters and backers. So make sure if you are subscribed, you want to hear more in the future about this tank, this channel, history, living in your aquarium, biology, all that good stuff. Make sure to click that bell when you click the subscribe button, and that will let you know when there's live streams and things like that going on. And I'm happy to answer your questions, chat with you guys, and have some fun. It's always a good community. So take care of yourselves so you can take care of others and your fish and all the things in your life that you love. And keep your head up, swim on. I'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.